All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into something pretty significant happening right now in New York State. It's all about advanced AI.
Yeah, and we're drawing heavily today from a TechCrunch article that just dropped yesterday, June 13th. The headline reads, New York passes a bill to prevent AI-fueled disasters.
Right, and our plan here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to pull out the key pieces from that article. We want to unpack what this new bill actually proposes, understand why it's emerging now, in the whole AI safety discussion.
And also how it compares to maybe previous attempts elsewhere and what kind of reactions it's stirring up, because there are definitely some strong opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. Lawmakers in New York just passed it, and it's certainly making waves.
It's a big move. Definitely one to watch.
Okay, so let's get into it. What is this bill at its core? What's the main thing it's trying to do?
So the bill's called the RAISE Act, R-A-I-S-E. It just passed the state legislature yesterday. And its main goal, according to TechCrunch, is pretty stark, actually. It's trying to prevent what they call frontier AI models from potentially causing, well, disasters.
Disaster scenarios. That
Oxy.
sounds serious. How does the bill actually define that? Is it specific?
It is, yeah. The article mentioned the definition is quite concrete. We're talking about stuff that could cause death or injury to over 100 people, or alternatively result in more than $1 billion in damages. So, yeah, they're focused on the really big potential downsides.
Okay, so definitely catastrophic scale. And who is this aimed at? Is it every single company working on AI?
No, not at all. It's very targeted, aimed squarely at the biggest AI labs, your OpenAIs, Googles, and Anthropic.
Heavy hitters.
Exactly. The scope seems tied to the computing power used for training. The article says it applies to companies whose models were trained using over $100 million worth of compute.
$100 million compute cost. So that really limits it.
Right. TechCrunch notes that threshold seemingly captures only the most powerful models out there today. And crucially, those models also have to be available to people in New York.
Okay, that makes sense. So biggest models, biggest labs available in New York. If Governor Hochul signs this, what do these companies actually have to do?
Well, the main requirements outlined in the source are about transparency and reporting. These big labs would need to publish these thorough safety and security reports about their frontier models.
Safety reports. Okay. What else?
They'd also have to report specific safety incidents, things like, if a model starts behaving unexpectedly in a concerning way, or if bad actors manage to steal a model, stuff like that.
And what happens if they, if they fail to publish these reports or report incidents?
There are teeth. The bill empowers New York's Attorney General to bring civil penalties, and they're not small, up to $30 million per violation.
$30 million, just for not meeting the standards. Okay, they're serious.
Seems like it. It's a signal, for sure.
All right, so we get the what transparency reporting for huge models, big penalties. But why is this happening right now? What's the broader context here?
The TechCrunch piece frames this whole thing as a definite win for the AI safety movement.
Okay.
And it gives some context, saying this movement has felt like it's maybe lost ground recently, with Silicon Valley and, the previous administration prioritizing speed and just getting things built.
Interesting framing. So this is seen as safety advocates pushing back and gaining some ground legislatively?
That seems to be the take, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting who's backing this, according to the article. Big names like Geoffrey Hinton, Nobel laureate.
Right, the godfather of AI.
And Yoshua Bengio, another pioneer. They've apparently championed this RAISE Act.
The article also has a quote from one of the sponsors, State Senator Andrew Gurnards. He sounds pretty urgent about it.
Yeah, he says the window to put in place guardrails is rapidly shrinking given how fast this technology is evolving. And he adds something quite striking about the risks. The people that know AI the best say that these risks are incredibly likely. That's alarming.
So that perspective, that sense of urgency from experts, seems to be the real driving force here.
Absolutely. It looks like a direct legislative response to those high-level concerns about where these super powerful models might be heading if unchecked.
Now, New York isn't the first state to try something like this. The article draws a line to California's attempt, right? How does RAISE compare to SB 147 in California?
Yeah, it definitely shares some similarities in goals with California's SB 2047, which remember was pretty controversial and ended up getting vetoed.
Right, but wasn't this New York bill specifically designed to avoid some of the criticisms that SB 2047 faced?
That's what the source indicates. Senator Gennard's apparently said he deliberately designed the RAISE Act such that it doesn't chill innovation among startups or academic researchers.
Ah, okay. Because that was a huge knock against the California bill that it would stifle the little guys.
Exactly. And the article mentions Nathan Calvin from ENCODE. Sounds like he worked on both bills, pointing out some key differences.
Like what?
Well, for one, the RAISE Act doesn't mandate that controversial kill switch feature for models,
Okay, that's a big one.
and it also doesn't hold companies accountable if they just, fine-tune or post-train a model that then causes harm. The focus is squarely on the original developers of those massive foundational models.
So it sounds like a more narrowly tailored approach, trying to learn from California's
It
experience.
seems that way, focusing just on the developers of the frontier models themselves.
But even with that narrower focus, the article says there's still significant pushback. What are the main criticisms being lobbed at the RAISE Act?
Well, Assemblymember Alex Bors, the co-sponsor in the Assembly, acknowledges resistance, particularly from Silicon Valley.
And we see some strong language quoted. Andreessen Horowitz's Anjani Mita called it a stupid state-level AI bill on X, worrying it hurts the U.S. competitively.
Yeah, and the article reminds us that A16Z, the VC firm, and Y Combinator were also big opponents of the California bill. So, consistent opposition there.
It's not just VCs, though, right? Even Anthropic, a company known for its safety focus.
Right. Their co-founder Jack Clark, according to the piece, said on X that Anthropic doesn't have an official stance yet. But he did raise concerns that the bill, maybe unintentionally, could still pose a risk to smaller companies.
Despite the $100 million compute threshold.
Apparently so,
Oh.
or at least that's the concern being voiced.
And Senator Gennard's reaction to that specific criticism.
The article says he felt it misses the mark, basically doubling down that the bill was explicitly designed not to hit smaller players. So there's definitely disagreement on how the scope will play out in practice.
Okay, so scope concerns, competitive concerns. What about the big one, the idea that companies might just leave?
Yeah, that's a major criticism mentioned in the source. The fear is that these big AI developers might just say, fine, we won't offer our most advanced models in New York if this becomes law. Just pull out.
And the article points out this isn't just hypothetical fear-mongering. It was raised against SB 2047, too, and it's kind of what happened in Europe with some tech regulations, right?
Exactly. The source notes it's largely what's played out in Europe. Companies sometimes choosing not to offer services due to tough regulations. It's the fragmentation worry.
A patchwork of state laws making things difficult. So how do the bill's supporters, like Assemblymember Bors, counter that specific argument that companies will just flee the New York market?
Bors told TechCrunch he thinks the actual regulatory burden here is relatively light. He doesn't see it as something that should force companies to pull their products from New York.
And he ties it back to economics.
He does. The article highlights his point. New York has the third largest GDP in the U.S. Pulling out of that market isn't a small decision. It's not something most companies would take lightly.
So he's betting the market size outweighs the compliance hassle.
Pretty much. He's quoted saying something like, I don't want to underestimate political pettiness, but I am very confident that there is no economic reason for AI companies to not make their models available in New York.
That's putting a marker down. Okay, so this deep dive really shows us New York taking a significant step, mandating transparency, safety reporting for these huge AI models.
Yeah, and it perfectly highlights that tension we keep seeing. The push for rapid AI innovation versus these urgent calls for guardrails driven by fears of potential, large-scale negative outcomes.
And as the article concludes, the ball is now in Governor Kathy Hochul's court. She has to decide whether to sign it into law.
A really crucial moment for this specific legislation and maybe for the broader AI safety debate in the U.S.
So for you listening, digesting all this, the push for rules, the specific requirements, the worries about slowing things down or creating state-by-state chaos, how do you think this plays out? If this New York bill becomes law, what kind of ripple effect might it have on the national conversation about AI safety?
And maybe even more fundamentally, as this tech just keeps accelerating, how do we even keep defining what counts as frontier AI? That $100 million compute threshold might look very different in just a year or two. Something to think about.